A girl sang in the street every night to pay for the treatment of her sick mother in a vegetative state. But when a passing millionaire heard her voice, "Before starting the video, tell me where you are watching this video and what time it is." The city bustled with its usual cacophony: honking cars, hurried footsteps, and muffled chatter. Amid this chaos, a melody emerged, soft yet unyielding, rising above the noise. On the corner of a dimly lit street, a teenage girl stood, her slight frame wrapped in a faded coat. A small wooden box sat at her feet, adorned with handwritten words, "Help my mother, please." Beside it, a tattered sheet displayed her story, the ink smudged by countless nights in the damp air. Every evening, as twilight surrendered to night, she prepared for her vigil. Her routine was almost sacred, warming up her voice with soft hums, gently unwrapping a scarf to reveal her well-worn microphone, and positioning herself under the only functioning street lamp. It cast a golden halo around her, turning her into an ethereal figure against the gritty urban backdrop. Her voice carried like a bomb, its purity jarring against the harshness of the streets. People slowed to listen, some paused, captivated. Others dropped coins into her box without meeting her gaze. Many, however, hurried past, their eyes fixed ahead, as if her music were merely another part of the city's noise. Home was a tiny, dim apartment above a convenience store. Inside, the girl's mother lay motionless on a narrow bed, her once vibrant face pale and expressionless. The girl, whose name was Elena, sat beside her, clutching her hand. "Hi, Mama," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I sang tonight. You would have loved it." A little girl clapped along. "Made me think of you teaching me those nursery rhymes." She bit her lip, holding back tears. Before the accident, her mother, Sophia, had been a painter, her laughter as vivid as the colors she worked with. She would often twirl Elena around their tiny living room, singing off-key to whatever song was stuck in her head. But everything changed the day a speeding car collided with Sophia on her way back from a gallery show. Now, Sophia was locked in silence, her world reduced to faint whispers and the distant hum of machines. Yet, Elena never stopped talking to her, recounting every detail of her day. Every night, she would sing her mother's favorite lullaby before heading out, hoping that somehow Sophia could still hear her. The accident had drained their savings. The hospital bills mounted faster than Elena could count, forcing her to leave school and take care of Sophia full-time. The doctor spoke in cold, clinical terms: persistent vegetative state, low chance of recovery, and expensive long-term care. Each phrase hit Elena like a slap. But there was a glimmer of hope: an experimental treatment offered at an out-of-state clinic. The cost was staggering, far beyond anything she could dream of affording, but Elena clung to the possibility. It was all she had. "I'll make it happen, Mama," she whispered one night, gazing at her mother's unresponsive face. "I'll find a way." With no one to turn to, Elena resolved to use the only gift she had: her voice. Every evening, she ventured into the streets, her determination unshaken by the jeers of strangers or the bite of the cold wind. As she tightened her scarf and stepped outside, she took a deep breath. "I sing for you," she murmured to herself, her eyes glinting with resolve. The evenings blurred into a cycle of grit and determination. Elena's spot on the corner became her stage, but not all performances were met with applause. "Get a real job," one man barked as he passed, tossing a penny that clattered on the pavement. Elena swallowed her pride and forced herself to keep singing. She couldn't let the hurt show, not when every coin, no matter how small, was a step closer to saving her mother. Other nights were kinder. An older woman stopped once to listen, her eyes glistening. "You've got a gift, sweetheart," she said, slipping a crumpled $20 bill into Elena's box. "Don't let anyone take that from you." After each performance, Elena returned home to count her earnings, her hands trembling with exhaustion. Most nights, the sum barely covered their groceries, let alone her mother's treatment. Still, she refused to quit. A kindly shopkeeper across the street took notice, offering her a warm drink and a few words of encouragement whenever she could. "You've got a fire in you, child," the woman said one night. "Don't let it burn out." Elena clung to those words as the weeks wore on. The rain poured relentlessly one night, soaking Elena to the skin. Her voice cracked as she pushed through a ballad, her tears mingling with the downpour. Few people braved the storm, and even fewer stopped to listen. She was ready to pack up when a sleek black car pulled up nearby. A man stepped out, his umbrella shielding him from the rain. Elena barely noticed him at first, focused as she was on the music. But as her song swelled, she saw him pause. He was well dressed, with an air of quiet authority. He didn't speak or approach. He simply listened, his head tilted as if hearing something he hadn't expected. When the song ended, he returned to his car without a word. For a moment, Elena felt a pang of disappointment, but something about his lingering gaze gave her hope. That night, as she counted her meager earnings, she couldn't shake the image of the man. Maybe her voice could reach someone who could help. "I have to keep going," she told herself. "He heard me. Maybe someone else will too." The challenges didn't relent. Winter crept in, and the biting cold made singing outdoors nearly unbearable. On some nights, the crowds were sparse, and on others, authorities warned her to move along. "Loitering isn't allowed here," one officer told her sternly, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Elena pleaded, clutching her donation box. "Please, I'm not begging. I'm just singing for my mother." The officer hesitated before letting her stay, but the encounter left her shaken. Doubt began to seep into her thoughts. Was she wasting her time? Could her voice ever truly change their circumstances? On her darkest nights, she considered giving up. But then, she remembered her mother's smile, the warmth of her laughter before the accident. One frigid evening, Elena sang with every ounce of emotion she had, pouring her fears and hopes into a song. Unbeknownst to her, the mysterious man was back, watching from the shadows. His expression softened as her voice soared, raw and unfiltered. Elena didn't see him leave, but his presence lingered in her mind, like a whisper of something greater waiting just beyond her reach. Elena's voice faltered as the biting wind stung her throat. That night, not a single person stopped to listen. Her donation box sat nearly empty, save for a few pennies and a crumpled dollar bill. With trembling hands, she clutched the box and sank onto a nearby bench. Her breath came in ragged sobs as she stared at the ground. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, the weight of months of effort crashing down on her. For the first time, her determination wavered. She felt small, insignificant against the magnitude of her mother's needs. "Why does it even matter?" she murmured, wiping her tears with her sleeve. Suddenly, a pair of polished shoes appeared in her line of sight. She looked up, startled, to see the man from before, the one who had stopped to listen on that rainy night. He stood before her, his tailored coat immaculate despite the weather, his eyes kind but intense. "You're the girl who sings every night," he said, his deep voice calm and measured. Elena nodded hesitantly, unsure of what to say. "Why do you do it?" he asked. Her resolve crumbled as she poured out her story. Her mother, the accident, the treatment she couldn't afford. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, her voice shaking with desperation. The man listened intently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, silence hung between them, broken only by the distant hum of the city. Then the man spoke. "Don't cry," he said gently. "Your voice is extraordinary. It deserves to be heard, and it can do much more than you think." The man introduced himself as Julian Cross, a philanthropist and businessman known for supporting the arts. Elena's mind reeled as he continued speaking. "I'm hosting an exclusive charity gala in a few weeks," he explained. "I'd like you to sing there. In return, I'll make sure your mother gets the care she needs." Elena's heart leapt, but doubt quickly crept in. I don't know if I'm good enough for something like that," she stammered. The thought of performing in front of a crowd of wealthy strangers terrified her. Julian smiled, his expression warm. "You're more than good enough. You just need to trust yourself." He offered her resources she'd never dreamed of, professional coaching, a team to help her prepare, and even a new outfit for the event. Elena hesitated, torn between fear and hope. But when she thought of her mother lying motionless at home, she knew she couldn't let this opportunity slip away. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves knotting her stomach. The days leading up to the gala were a whirlwind. Elena worked tirelessly, practicing for hours under the guidance of a vocal coach. The Millionaire's team encouraged her at every step, and though the pressure was immense, she felt a flicker of confidence growing inside her. The night of the gala arrived, and Elena stood backstage, her hands trembling as she clutched the microphone. Dressed in a simple but elegant gown, she hardly recognized herself in the mirror. The opulent ballroom glittered beyond the curtains, filled with an audience of influential guests. "Just breathe," Julian said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've got this." When her name was announced, the room fell silent as Elena stepped into the spotlight. Her heart raced, but as she began to sing, everything else melted away. Her voice filled the space, raw and unguarded, carrying every ounce of her love, pain, and hope. The audience was spellbound. Tears streamed down faces, and some guests reached for their wallets, moved by both her story and her music. As the final note hung in the air, the room erupted into applause, a standing ovation that left Elena overwhelmed. Backstage, Julian approached her with a soft smile. "Look at what you've done," he said. "This is just the beginning." A member of the gala's organizing team handed Elena an envelope. Inside was a life-changing sum of money, more than enough to cover her mother's treatment. For the first time in months, Elena felt the crushing weight of her burden lift. The very next morning, Elena and her mother were admitted to a prestigious clinic. Doctors examined Sophia with a mix of optimism and caution. "The treatment is promising, but recovery takes time," the lead physician explained. "Patience and perseverance will be key." Elena spent every waking moment by her mother's side, her voice a constant companion. She sang the lullabies her mother used to teach her, soft melodies that filled the sterile hospital room with warmth. Though Sophia remained unresponsive, Elena held on to hope, refusing to believe her voice wasn't reaching somewhere deep inside. One afternoon, as she finished a song, she noticed the faintest twitch in her mother's fingers. Her breath caught. "Mama," she whispered, leaning closer. But the movement didn't repeat. Still, it was enough to spark hope in her heart. The weeks passed in a blur of therapy sessions and quiet moments of waiting. Then, one miraculous evening, Sophia's eyelids fluttered briefly, and Elena's heart leapt. Though fleeting, it was a sign, a whisper of a future she had fought so hard to reclaim. Julian remained a steady presence in Elena's life. He visited the clinic often, checking on her mother's progress and encouraging Elena to think about her own future. "You have a gift," he told her one day. "It would be a shame not to share it with the world." He offered her a scholarship to a prestigious conservatory, covering every expense. The idea thrilled and terrified Elena. "But I can't leave my mother," she said, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Julian nodded thoughtfully. "Your mother's treatment is in good hands, and she would want you to chase your dreams," he said gently. Elena wrestled with the decision for days. One morning, as she sat by Sophia's bed, she poured out her fears. "I don't know what to do, Mama," she said softly. "What if leaving means I'm abandoning you?" To her astonishment, her mother's fingers twitched again. This time Elena was sure of it. It was as if Sophia was giving her the answer she needed. With tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Okay, Mama. I'll do it for both of us." Months later, after beginning her studies at the conservatory, Elena returned to the clinic during a break. The sight that greeted her left her speechless. Sophia was sitting up in bed, her eyes following Elena as she entered the room. "Mama," Elena gasped, rushing to her side. Sophia's lips curved into a faint but unmistakable smile. "Elena," she whispered, her voice hoarse but clear. Elena collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing with relief and joy. In the days that followed, Sophia's recovery continued steadily. She began speaking more, her voice growing stronger, and even started regaining some mobility with physical therapy. The bond between mother and daughter deepened further, forged by their shared resilience and love. One evening, as they sat together, Elena sang a lullaby. This time Sophia joined in, her voice fragile but unmistakably hers. Julian watched from the doorway, moved by the sight. "You two are extraordinary," he said softly. Elena smiled through her tears. "We had a lot of help," she replied, glancing at him with gratitude. Elena threw herself into her studies at the conservatory with the same determination that had carried her through the streets. Her professors marveled at her raw talent, and her peers admired her unwavering drive. Though she was surrounded by seasoned musicians, Elena's performances stood out, not because of technical perfection, but because her voice carried a depth of emotion few could replicate. Between classes, she visited her mother whenever she could, bringing updates about her progress. Sophia's recovery was slow but steady, and every visit felt like a celebration. On one such visit, Sophia surprised Elena by standing with the help of a walker. "See," she said with a smile. "I told you I'd be back on my feet." Inspired by her mother's resilience, Elena began composing her own music, drawing from the struggles and triumphs of their shared journey. Her professors encouraged her to perform one of her pieces during a student recital. Nervous but excited, Elena took the stage, her fingers trembling as she gripped the microphone. When she sang, the room fell silent. Her peers and professors listened, enraptured by the raw honesty of her performance. By the time she finished, the applause was thunderous, and Elena felt a deep sense of belonging. She was finally where she was meant to be. Months later, Elena returned to her old street corner. This time she didn't bring her donation box, only her voice. She stood under the familiar street lamp, her heart swelling with nostalgia as she sang. Passers-by paused, drawn to the beauty of her music, just as they had before. But now, instead of pity, they felt joy and admiration. A crowd began to gather, their faces lit with wonder. Among them, Elena spotted the shopkeeper who had always encouraged her, clapping along with a wide smile. As the song ended, Elena glanced at the edge of the crowd and saw Julian standing there, his hands in his pockets, a proud smile on his face. For a moment, their eyes met, and he gave her a small nod as if to say, "You've done it." Elena looked around at the crowd, realizing how far she'd come. The memories of her struggles on that very corner flooded back, but instead of sadness, she felt gratitude. Everything she had endured had led her to this moment. A year later, Elena stood on the stage of a grand concert hall, the lights blinding and the audience vast. The murmurs of anticipation faded as she stepped forward, her gown shimmering under the spotlight. In the front row, Sophia sat with Julian beside her, both beaming with pride. Sophia, now fully conscious and mobile, clapped enthusiastically as the performance began. Elena's heart swelled as she met her mother's gaze. Everything she had fought for was worth it. Elena began to sing, her voice soaring through the hall. The music told a story of love, sacrifice, and resilience, and the audience was enraptured. By the time the final note faded, the hall erupted into a standing ovation. Tears streamed down Elena's face as she bowed, her gaze lingering on her mother. She had dreamed of this moment for so long, and now it was real. She was no longer the girl singing on the streets. She was an artist whose voice had touched countless hearts. As the applause thundered, the stage lights dimmed, and Elena stood tall, her journey of love and perseverance finally complete.